Happy Monday, everybody. Okay, so we had some interesting news come out of the Federal Reserve this last week. So, what they announced was that for the second time only in the last 50 years, bank credit has experienced sustained contraction. Now, as you can imagine, sustained contraction means shrinking, right? And again, this is only the second time in 50 years. Well, when was the last time? During the Great Recession. And as we all know, that was not a great time for the economy. And this isn't a good sign. It's another kind of canary in the coal mine. Because what does that mean? It means that banks aren't lending money now out into the economy. Why is that? Well, because rates are so expensive. And so it's more expensive to borrow money. And that slows people down. It slows down individuals who are trying to buy homes, slows down folks that are trying to buy cars, so on and so forth. But the bigger impact is the impact on businesses, because businesses have the ability to borrow massive amounts of money, millions of dollars. Those millions of dollars are spent on projects that the business has, right? They could be construction projects. They're building new facilities. That's a lot of money that goes out in the economy. They're hiring contractors, buying materials, licenses, or it could be hiring new employees because they're going to start a new endeavor into a new line of business. So if businesses aren't borrowing millions of dollars, then that's millions of dollars that are not being spent because those projects are being put on hold. Now, last year, we saw stimulus money come into the economy. And I think that's why it's taken so long to see this recession. We didn't have a recession last year, not technically. And I'm going to put together several topics from the last several missive videos that we've put out. But, we've talked about the stimulus funds coming into the economy, $6 trillion, massive amounts of money. And it just takes a long time to work its way through the system, right? Like that picture of a python swallowing a pig. It just takes a long time for that money to work its way through the system. So folks had been getting these stimulus checks and kept spending. Then the stimulus checks stopped, but the spending didn't, because people started spending down their savings accounts lower than they were before the COVID hit. At the same time, they were borrowing money on those credit cards. So now we've seen credit card debt grow higher than it was before COVID. And at some point, both of those have to stop, right? You can only spend down savings down to zero and then no more spending. And you can only spend credit cards up to a point where they get maxed out. And then no more spending, right? It's not like we can be the federal government and just borrow more money to pay those credit cards. Now that's a joke from the last video as well. So now that we've seen credit card balances and savings accounts get to extreme levels, and now we've seen bank credit contracting. Those are precursors to a recession. And this is not even to talk about the inverted yield curve that we've talked about before. So just additional indicators. Now, this last point was a interview that I saw last week from Jamie Dimon. Now, as you know, Jamie Dimon is the CEO of JP Chase. And by the way, JP Chase is the largest owner of silver in the world. They own more physical silver than any individual or any government in the world. Anyway, JP Chase, the CEO, interesting. The interview, if you haven't seen it, you should go find it, because it actually caused an uproar politically. Because in that, Jamie Dimon says, he's identified himself before as barely a Democrat. That's how he's described himself. And he has not been a vocal supporter of Trump. However, in this interview last week, he pointed out a lot of the policies that Trump had gotten right. And I found it interesting, and more so because of the uproar that it caused in the media. That stuff didn't bother me. What caught my attention was what he was saying about the economy. He said that he's skeptical that we are now in a Goldilocks scenario like the one Janet Yellen says that we're in. And what is a Goldilocks scenario? Well, if you remember in the fairy tale, Goldilocks and the Three Bears, she got in a bed that was too big, she got in a bed that was too small, then she got in the bed that was just right. Or she had oatmeal that was too hot or oatmeal that was too cold, but then she got the oatmeal that was just right. Well, Janet Yellen has said that we are in the Goldilocks scenario, which means just right, threading that needle to avoid a recession. And, how often do we see a perfect scenario in the real world? Not often. And so I've been skeptical that we found ourselves in the Goldilocks scenario. But what's interesting is that now Jamie Dimon is saying that he's skeptical as well. So take that for what it's worth. And also, just so you know, just like J.P. Morgan Chase owns physical silver, if there is a recession, or I should say when there's a recession, there's going to be businesses that file bankruptcy. There's going to be stocks on the stock market that go down to zero because that's what happens when a company files bankruptcy. And you won't be affected by that because none of your assets can file bankruptcy. So, if there will be fluctuations, but what you're invested in can't file bankruptcy. And that's one of the reasons we like them. So with that, just know you're doing well, and we look forward to seeing you next week. Take care. Bye-bye.